Hello and welcome to the channel. Operation Stösser, Alpha English Operation Hawk, was the final German paratrooper drop during the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. The drop was into the Americans' rear in the High Fens region of the Ardennes. Its objective was to take and hold the crossroads at N68 and N672 until the arrival of the 12th SS Panzer Division to relieve them. Both roads were main supply routes. The N68 and N672 lead to either Malmedy, known for its infamous massacre, or to Elsenborn, to the local strategic high ground of the Elsenborn Ridge. The operation was led by Oberst Friedrich August Freiherr von der Heydter, a seasoned paratrooper, commander and veteran of the airborne assault on Crete. However, prior, von der Heydter was given 8 days to prepare for a mission, but not given any specific details. On the 8th of December, von der Heydter was summoned by Generaloberst Kurt Student, who told him that the Führer had devised an airborne operation of which he would be the commander of. The operation, conceived by Adolf Hitler, was to parachute at night north of Malmedy a unit of Fallschirmjäger under the orders of Heydter. This was to either open the road to the High Fens for German tanks or to secure the front lines between Eupen and Malmedy. On December the 11th, planning for the operation, he was given the content of his mission. It was expected that the 6th SS Panzer Army would have, by this point, taken the bridges over the Meuse south of the city by the second day of the Ardennes offensive. And, at dawn on the second day, he was dropped with his men near Barak Michel. There, he would have to seize the crossroads in order to allow the vanguard to advance quickly in the direction of Liège. Von der Heydter wanted to use men from his own regiment, but this was forbidden because the movement might alert allies to the impending counterattack. Instead, he was provided a Kampfgruppe of 800 men from the 2nd Parachute Corps. The 2nd Parachute Corps was tasked with contributing 100 men from each of its regiments. Instead of contributing their best men as ordered, the regiment sent its less experienced and undertrained men. This included misfits and troublemakers. Although he did not expect to receive the best from each regiment, von der Heydter was nevertheless quickly disappointed with those who arrived. The majority of the Fallschirmjäger and pilots assigned to this operation were undertrained and inexperienced. On the 13th of December, the various practical problems concerning the operation were addressed. Heydter had received 2 Luftwaffe transport units that were planned for the drop, one of which had been specifically trained for this operation. The 2 units were formed of 67 Junkers Ju-52s. However, what greatly worried Heydter was the lack of training that crews of these aircrafts had received. The majority had only the absolute necessary training and were not even qualified to fly these aircrafts. In loyalty to their commander, 150 men from von der Heydter's own unit, the 6th Parachute Regiment, disobeyed orders and joined him. The men had little time to establish unit cohesion or train together. Many of the men assigned to Heydter had never jumped out of an airplane before. Heydter later commented, "Never in my entire career had I been in command of a unit with less fighting spirit." On the 13th of December, Heydter visited the headquarters of Army Group B near Bad Münstereifel to complain that the resources allocated to him for the operation were wholly inadequate. Originally scheduled for the 16th of December, the drop was delayed for a day when the assigned aircrafts did not show up. The new drop time was set for 0300 hours on the 17th of December. The drop zone was 7 miles or 11 kilometers north of Malmedy. Their objective was to seize the crossroads and hold it for approximately 24 hours until relieved by the 12th SS Panzer Division, hampering the flow of the Allied reinforcements and supplies in the area. Problems began on the morning of the 16th of December when some of the trucks loaded with personnel did not arrive at the airfields. It was later found out that by 0400 only half of the personnel had left their departure bases. For the best part of the day on the 16th, von der Heydter believed the whole operation would be cancelled. But in the afternoon he received a phone call that the advance of the 6th SS Panzer Army was far from achieving its hoped-for objectives, and therefore a new date for the operation had been rescheduled. At around 2300 hours on the 16th of December, the units were assembled. Pilots were told the wind speed was 6 meters per second over the drop zone. However, local equipment indicated an even higher speed than that. The consequences was that by dropping paratroopers at the scheduled time, the inexperienced troops would be scattered over a larger area. Just after midnight on the 17th of December, 112 Junkers Ju-52 transport planes with around 1,300 paratroopers on board took off during a powerful snowstorm with strong winds and considerable low cloud cover. The Luftwaffe was short of experienced pilots. Many of the pilots had never flown the Ju-52 before. Half had never flown in combat, nor were they trained to conduct drops at night or to fly in formation. Pathfinders from the Nachtschlafgruppe 20, or Night Fighter Group 20 in English, were supposed to lead the way, but the pilots were so inexperienced that they flew with the navigation lights on. When he jumped, von der Heydter realised that around him only a dozen planes were dropping their paratroopers. From that moment on, he was certain the mission was a failure. Only 450 landed in the High Fens. Many of the planes went off course. 250 men were dropped near Bonn, 50 miles or 80 kilometres from the intended drop zone, and some even landed with their paratroopers still on board, missing the drop entirely. Strong winds deflected many of the paratroopers' planes who were relatively close. Only a fraction of the force landed near the intended drop zone, and since so many of the German paratroopers were inexperienced, some were crippled upon impact and died when they fell. By 0500 hours, only about 25 men were gathered around their commander. 3 hours later, there were 150. Their armaments were reduced to a minimum, with only enough food for 24 hours, possibly 48 hours if rationed, no more than 4 boxes of ammunition, and they had 1 mortar for heavy weapons. They therefore limited themselves to setting up defensive positions and sending out reconnaissance missions on the road of Verviers, Eupen and Malmedy. On the evening of the 17th of December, a group that had jumped further north managed to reach von der Heydter, who found himself with about 300 men. Because of the extensive dispersal of the drop, Fallschirmjäger were reported all over the Ardennes, and Allies at the time believed that a major division-sized jump had taken place. This caused the Americans much confusion and convinced them to allocate men to secure the rear instead of facing the main German thrust at the front. An entire US infantry regiment of 3,000 men of the 18th Infantry Regiment, along with an armoured combat command of 300 tanks and 2,000 men, searched for several days for the German forces. On the 19th of December, the Americans had become aware of the presence of German paratroopers and began their hunt. A few skirmishes took place, causing some injuries and exhausting the men, but also their ammunition. The more time passed, von der Heydter realised that he would not be able to hold out for much longer, and he decided to break through to the east in order to reach friendly lines. With limited recovery of supplies from drop containers, Heydter's unit had scouted the woods and rounded up a total of 300 troops. The force was too small to take the crossroads on its own. Heydter's first plan was to wait for the arrival of the 12th SS Panzer Division, when they would suddenly seize the crossroads just before their arrival. However, the 12th SS Panzer Division was unable to defeat the Americans at the Battle of the Elsenborn Ridge and never arrived. After 3 days of waiting, Heydter abandoned these revised plans and instead converted his mission to reconnaissance. None of the unit's radios had survived the drop, so he was unable to report the detailed information he gathered. With only a single day's food supply and limited water, on the 19th of December, Heydter withdrew his forces towards the German lines. He used their limited ammunition to attack the rear of the Americans. Only about 1/3 reached the German rear. Heydter himself was wounded, frostbitten, and was suffering from pneumonia. In order to give themselves as many chances as possible, von der Heydter ordered that the retreat to their own lines would be done in groups of 3. When he arrived in a local town on the night of the 21st to the 22nd of December, von der Heydter was exhausted. He entered one of the first houses in town, where he was later taken prisoner by American soldiers of the 395th Regiment of the 99th Infantry Division. After seeking local refuge, Heydter the next morning sent a local child with a surrender note to the Allies. He was taken prisoner on the 23rd of December and remained in custody until 1947. The entire operation was a German failure, and the last time German paratroopers were utilised for their intended role on the Western Front, and from this, the Luftwaffe never regained its strength or recovered its numbers and losses. Many of the Fallschirmjäger that returned to friendly lines went on to continue the fighting during December and into January. Many were later captured or surrendered to the Americans and were taken as prisoners of war. Large amounts were captured by the American 16th Infantry of the 1st Infantry Division, and many historical valuable photos from this period were taken near Verviers in Belgium on January the 15th, 1945. I would like to apologise between the delay on the last video and this one. However, I specifically wanted to publish this video on the anniversary. Thank you for watching this video on the 80th anniversary of Operation Stösser. Please drop this video a like, as these research videos do take a while, and subscribe to the channel as to not miss any future content.